Shabbat Shalom and Chag Pride Sameach. This is one of our most important Chagim, is Pride. Also, we remember that the first Pride was a riot. Many of us have seen this printed boldly on countless banners and t-shirts over the years. In the haze of rainbow glitter and balloons, in the ecstatic joy of our Pride celebrations, which, if online this year, are still authentic. And in our overflowing exuberance, we remember that it's true. The first Pride was a riot. Around 1 a.m. on June 28, 1969, 51 years ago tonight, patrons of the Stonewall Inn in the Village fought back against a police raid. Former CBST President Michael Levine was there. These raids at the time had become commonplace. The often violent police would turn on the lights, line everyone up, demand identification, and those dressed in non-gender conforming clothing were arrested. Why was this night in June of 1969 different from all other nights? This night, we fought back. Why? Some remember feeling devastated over Judy Garland's death, her funeral having been held earlier that day. Some recall that a tipping point had just been reached and that there was a new energy in the air that night. There are differing accounts of the evening, which has become a collage of memoir and mythology that only a historical moment that changed everything could have become. Led by trans women, and especially trans women of color, like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, and the gay men who were the majority of Stonewall patrons, and the biracial butch lesbian, Stormy DeLarvier, who yelled to the crowds as she was being arrested and fighting off the police. Why don't you guys do something? We are people of rebellion. We LGBTQ people, we Jewish people, we are the inheritors of Stonewall, just as we are the inheritors of the Exodus from Egypt. We are people who have been oppressed throughout history and who have fought for our liberation. We are also a people who often disagree with each other. The old story about 2 Jews and 3 opinions comes to mind, as does last year's disagreement over how to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 1 LGBTQ people, 2 marches. And this year, the LGBTQ community, with all of our overlapping identities, has shown up in profound and unified ways for the movement for racial justice, proclaiming Black Lives Matter and Black trans lives matter, and uplifting those who are raising their prophetic voices and giving their whole hearts to this historic movement. And our inheritance of rebellion is why I so struggle with this week's Parsha, the quintessential biblical rebellion. In yet another protest among the Israelites against Moshe, Korach the Levite organizes 250 leaders in the community, proclaiming, "You have gone too far. Rav lachem, for all the community are holy, all of them. Ki chol ha'edah kulam kedoshim, and God is in their midst. Uvtocham Adonai. Why then do you raise yourselves above God's congregation. Korach's challenge comes after a long series of protests and complaints. Wandering in the wilderness has not been good for morale, let's just say. From the golden calf to very recently, when Aaron and Miriam dared to challenge their brother Moshe, reminding him that he is not the only prophet among the 3 siblings. And for that, Miriam was punished with leprosy. In this week's story, Korach and his followers are punished in an even more dramatic fashion. They are swallowed up by the earth. Reading this story on Pride Shabbat is challenging, to say the least, because the first Pride was a riot. We are people of rebellion. And also, Korach's message that all the community is holy surely resonates with us. Our tradition teaches that we are all created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim. So how do we today, at the height of our Pride celebration, not admire and uplift Korach? After all, Pride is about rebellion. So I would struggle to bring a message of faithful obedience to authority on this Shabbat of our Pride. So let us look at how Korach carries out his rebellion. Our rabbinic tradition teaches in a midrash that he does so with a blatant arrogance and disrespect, targeting the commandments that were just given a few verses before in the familiar text that is the 3rd paragraph after the Shema, to wear tzitzit, ritual fringes, and to affix a mezuzah on one's doorpost and gates. Korach argues with Moshe about these technicalities to try to exempt someone from these commandments, and we learn from the rabbis that he does so in a way that is obnoxious. But we are a people of rebellion. There is a teaching from the Kotzker Rebbe, who was a 19th century Hasidic master teacher, who I always feel a special honor bringing his teaching, because there is a tradition in my family that we are descended from him. The Kotzker Rebbe calls Korach der Heiliger Zayde, our holy grandfather. And I feel that deeply, that we are the grandchildren of Korach. But even so, perhaps we must always ensure anyway that our confidence is balanced with humility and respect. Moshe models this with his natural tendency toward humility. Immediately after Korach's challenge, Moshe falls on his face. We read, Vayishma Moshe vayipol al panav. He then defers to God to make the judgment, and God is the one who decides to punish Korach. The Talmud notes that the name Korach comes from a root meaning void, korcha, because he created a blank spot in the people Israel. Whereas in Korach, we find a certain arrogance and a certain blankness in the imagery of our prideful rebellion. We find all the colors of the rainbow. This morning in our special Pride Maftir, which Andy Engel chanted so beautifully just a few moments ago, we recalled the Keshet, the rainbow, the sign of the eternal covenant between God and humanity. According to the Torah, this is God's sign to remember, even when humanity is messing up in the worst, most extreme ways, which we definitely do. The rainbow reminds God of God's own promise, never to destroy the world again. But the rainbow is also a reminder to us to be humble enough to be hopeful, even during the cloudiest and darkest days, because we do not know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe it will bring a rainbow. It is still time for pride, even in a pandemic, because pride and humility are not mutually exclusive, and they can both be deep wellsprings of hope. And we are still Korach's grandchildren, a people of rebellion with a long fought and hard-won pride. And if we can live out our inheritance of both Stonewall and the Exodus from Egypt, then we can foster in ourselves the capacity for rainbow rebellions that light up the world. Happy Pride and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, that was beautiful. And the tension about these things are something that has so much truth and power to give us in this moment of figuring out how to protest, how to be the voice of outrage in a moment of deep holiness. So thank you so much, Deborah. That was beautiful, really beautiful.